Hello, and welcome to this Australian-New Zealand Women's Declaration International webinar for October 2024. My name is Janet Fraser, coming to you from Gundungurra, west of Sydney. I'm the convener of the Feminist Legal Clinic in Exile. Tonight I have Anna Kerr and Bronwyn Williams from the Feminist Legal Clinic doing tech with me. Wherever you're coming from this evening, we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and particularly the women of this continent. A reminder that the presentation is recorded and question time is not. When we end for questions, I'd appreciate it if women use the Q&A box for written questions so I don't lose them in the chat. If you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand icon and I'll keep a running list of the order in which I see you appear. And now to introduce our excellent speakers. Stassja Frei lives in Naarm. Stassja's initial foray into the gender wars was in 2020 when she created the Facebook group, the Coalition for Biological Reality. For a time, it was the most active gender-critical group in Australia. She then went on to co-host a weekly chat show, Turf Talk Down Under, which was the first dedicated gender-critical YouTube channel in Australia. While on hiatus from Turf Talk, Stassja had the idea to create an investigative podcast series, Desexing Society. Season 1 launched back in April this year and explores how the gender affirmation model infiltrated Australian children's hospitals and how trans ideology became embedded in public schools. Welcome aboard, speakers. So now I would like to invite Stassja up to the microphone and hear some more about your podcast. Stassja, welcome.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks for the intro.
We're thrilled to have you here. I've been hoping that you would come on for quite a while now. So shall we start with talking about your podcast, which is awesome, Desexing Society. How did you come to the name and what prompted you to make the podcast in the first place?
The name. Well, I guess because everything is being desexed, where our language is being desexed, our spaces, our sport, this idea that we shouldn't be teaching children that there's boys and girls, we can't use that language around them. And then the obvious that, you know, doctors are literally desexing children. It's probably not the most polite way to say it, but that's how it is. So that's why I picked that name. But honestly, if I could go back, I might pick something different because it kind of sounds like, like the RSPCA, Desexing Animals Society, and that's certainly what comes up if you don't add the word podcast on the end in a Google search. You get all these societies for the protection of animals. But look, what gave me the idea was I was listening to a lot of podcasts during my hiatus from Turf Talk, and originally I wanted to make a documentary series. And so for about a year, I think I went around telling people, yeah, I'm going to make this documentary series. And it just got to the point where I had to accept that I didn't have the film editing skills or cinematography skills to pull that off. But so I'm on my break from Turf Talk. I'm listening to all these podcasts, and I just had the idea, I think I could do this. Doing just audio without film removes this huge layer of technical difficulty, and I thought I could handle this. I could have a go. So that's one aspect of it, but really, you know, you must know what it's like, Janet. You have the same arguments. It's like, how many different ways can I say the same argument over and over again on social media? And I thought, well, why don't I just put it all in one place? And then I don't have to have those arguments anymore. I can just give them a link to my podcast series. So it sort of is, I suppose, the gender critical thesis is what I've tried to present it was obvious that none of the legacy media sites were going to cover this anytime soon. So it's sort of that matter of well, no one's coming to save us. We have to step up and do this. So I did it. Yeah.
And I have to say, I am an unashamed fan. I have listened 3 times now because there's so much in it that I feel like I get something new every time, or things change very quickly at times, and so I hear things and I hear them in a new light. So I have found it really wonderful, and particularly since it's Australian, and that I think makes it a really important document of this struggle that we're all invested in. So, what surprised you the most about making your podcast?
Uh, I think the extent of when, because I had to go in and actually look at the Dutch research that this is all based on, and I had read Dr. Michael Biggs's article on his paper on that previously, but I don't think it really sunk in until I'm having to describe it in the podcast. Just how flawed that original Dutch research that all of this is based on, how flawed it really is, just blew me away. So I have just made a couple of notes here because it's a little bit messy to describe. But so for starters, that research has never been replicated. So, and this is a big problem in psychology papers, psychology studies, is they call it the replication crisis. You get these results once and they're never reproduced in any future attempts. Okay, that's one thing that's problematic. Then you find out one of the kids died from the surgeries, and Michael Biggs does a really excellent job of linking that back to the fact that that was a boy who was given puberty blockers, whose penis didn't grow, and so when it came time to do the surgery at 18, there wasn't enough skin to work with. They had to use part of his colon, and he developed sepsis and died. And the way Michael Biggs points it out, if you had a COVID vaccine that killed 1 in 70 people, there is no way it would ever go ahead. But because this is gender medicine, like for some reason, once it becomes about gender and someone's internal sense of self, these safeguards are just like ignored or just go out the window. So that was pretty distressing. And then the bit that really blew me away was, which is just mind boggling, was the fact that they switched the scales. So in the original research, let's say a boy comes into the Amsterdam clinic at 12 years old. They give him this survey to answer, which is meant to measure how bad he has gender dysphoria. Um, so they'll ask him a question. Oh, sorry, lost my train of thought. But then after he's had the cross-sex hormones and after he's had the surgery, they'll give him this survey that's meant for females. Sorry, I don't think I've described that very well. I describe it better in the podcast. Everyone should listen to the podcast. So let's say, okay, let me try and do it differently. A 12-year-old girl comes in. She's given this questionnaire that's designed for females. She's asked on a scale to rate how she feels about the statement, "I prefer to behave like a boy." And she's going to tick, yes, I highly agree, because she's got gender dysphoria. But then, after she's had the cross-sex hormones and the surgery, they give her the scale for males. And it asks her a question, my life would be meaningless if I had to live as a boy. And so she's going to answer, I highly agree with that statement. So it seems like her gender dysphoria has dissipated, has gone away, has been fixed because she's had all these medical interventions. But the exact same outcome could have been achieved if you had given her the female scale questionnaire to fill in, and then 10 minutes later, you give her the boys questionnaire to answer, and voila, her gender dysphoria is gone, and you haven't even had to do any medical interventions. So, like, that alone is like, we should not be listening to this study at all. It's garbage. Yeah, that's probably the most surprising part. Yeah.
I found it really frightening listening to the podcast and the teachers talking about the stranglehold of gender identity on schools. Could you talk a bit about that?
Mm. Yeah, look, that's probably my favorite episode. It was really easy to write because there was just so much material to work with. But it really is a case of what Helen Joyce described in the title of her book, when ideology meets reality. Um, so the teacher, what name did I give her? Victoria. Um, she was describing how in these meetings with other teachers, it's obvious that the other teachers are really uncomfortable with the idea of putting male children in overnight accommodation with the girls. And they're all really uncomfortable, but they're like, no one wants to say that this is wrong, we shouldn't be doing this. So that was frightening. And the way that, so the other woman in that episode, she's an allied health professional. She didn't want to state her actual position at the school. So allied health professionals can be anything from, occupational therapists, psychologists, speech pathologists, these sorts of health professional fields. So she got found out. She went through this secret trial. So it was through posts that she'd made on social media. Some nasty person dobbed her into the school, and she had to go through this, inquisition. And the phrase she used was the white hot burning rage at the fact that she knew she had done nothing wrong. And, where does she go with what's happened to her? If she goes public, she'll never work in schools again. It's just a terrible, terrible position for those teachers to be in. But another thing that I didn't end up including was one of the teachers had done so they do this professional development stuff on the side, and she had done a information and communications technology professional development deep dive, like what are the kids getting up to on the internet these days. And she said she was shocked by what she was learning, but it just gave her this amazing insight, so that when a girl shows up at school dressed like an anime character, and like she knows what this girl has been doing online. But she sort of said at one point, like, that we just have to get kids off the internet. Like, we should never have, like, in Victoria, it's been mandated that, every kid has I think a laptop or a tablet, something like that. She's like, we should never, ever have gone down that path. We need to get kids off the internet. So, and I agree with her.
Yeah, that's that's I don't know how you get that back in the box along with gender identity. I don't know how we reel it in, get it back in the box. What do you think from seeing all this stuff in schools? What do you think parents can do to help their kids avoid getting tangled in it, apart from get them off the internet, which is the first thing I always say too. What else do you think? What came up that you thought might be useful in that?
Yeah, look, I don't have kids myself, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. But in terms of prevention, one thing would be you've got to have the conversations with your kids about sex-based stereotypes and explain it to them in a way that they can understand that it doesn't mean that you have to exchange your body to fit these stereotypes. I think that's a really important one. Um, it's really hard. I think giving your kid a strong sense of self. I don't know how you do that, but um, yeah, sorry, I'm not much help there. In terms of if your kid does get caught in the trap, uh, one idea I heard was take them on low budget holidays to places where there's no internet, no Wi-Fi, and just keep doing that, getting them away from it all every now and then. That's one thing I thought sounded useful.
I love that practical tip. That's like getting them off the internet without having to go through the agony of getting them off the internet.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I like it. I'll add that to the list of things I kind of carry around with me. So, what's the response to your podcast been like? Have you had a lot of hate or not, or what's happened?
No, it's pretty much flown under the radar. Trans activists haven't discovered it. Um, People who have listened through to the whole thing, I've had a lot of positive feedback from them. I did get some pushback early on for interviewing Phil Illy, an autogynephile. But that largely came from people who hadn't listened to it, which was disappointing. But yeah, look, overall, it's pretty much been a flash in the pan. Uh, it hasn't had as many listens as I would have hoped for. I was sort of relying on. I thought that the Turf network would just spread it. It would just spread amongst the Turf network, and unfortunately, it hasn't. So globally, it really is just like a drop in the ocean. And I don't know, there's probably a number of reasons for that. One, I could have done a much better job marketing it. So I've learnt that lesson for next time. Um, and I don't know, is it because it's Australian? Do Australians just sort of get ignored internationally? I don't know. I don't know. Um, yeah, so any help spreading the word, please do it, turfs.
Absolutely. I have nagged all of my friends, particularly the friends with kids, because so many people are shocked. And, sometimes a woman sends me a message, and I've always thought she was like super turf. And then her kids will start saying things to her, and she's like, "Oh, I didn't know this was happening at school." And I think, where have you been? And then I can go, look at this podcast, listen to this, because you need to know. So, when women talk about prevention, your podcast is one of the things that I send them, because then they can kind of see so much of what they're up against. Because you go to school and the propaganda is everywhere, and kids are on the net and the propaganda is everywhere. And if you look at TV, the propaganda is everywhere. Like, there's almost nowhere that's free of it nowadays. And of course, then we're getting into furries and anime porn and all that kind of stuff as well. So I think one of the fantastic things about podcast is that it is in itself useful to arm parents so that they can hear what teachers are saying about this stuff as well. So I guess what's in store for season 2, because there is season 2 and I'm very excited about that. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so when I set out and did all the initial interviews for this, I had the idea that it was going to be like a couple of episodes on gender affirming care for children, and then a couple of episodes on women's rights. And I did way too many interviews. I couldn't fit the women's rights stuff into season 1, so it was like, okay, I'm going to have to write season 2. So I've got the big names in for season 2, like Janet Fraser, and possibly a reappearance from Anna Kerr. I've got I've got all the high profile turfs. I guess they're high profile. So Sel Grover, Kath Deves, Moira Deeming, Kit Kowalski, Edie Wyatt. Yeah. So, gosh, I've started work on season 2, and it's tricky. It's tricky. I thought it would be easier than season 1, because season 1 just required so much reading and research for me, because I felt that the gender affirming healthcare really wasn't my strong suit. I thought that the women's rights stuff was going to be my strong suit, but the fact is there is just so much information out there. Like, you could genuinely do like an entire season on just women's sports. You really could. So now I'm faced with this problem of having to like pare it all down to like bare bones and get the message out there. And yeah, it's hard work. For anyone who's written a book or written lengthy documents, you know what it's like.
Yes, I can strongly relate to that. What do you think we need to do to get rid of gender identity out of Australian society and back in its box as just a weird cult?
Gosh, it's so tricky, isn't it? Um, Look, this might be controversial for this audience, but I'm going to say it anyway. So what I understand has happened over in WA is that a whole bunch of gender critical women joined the Liberal Party and started going to meetings and trying to get these issues on the agenda at those meetings, and it just kept talking about it, just kept getting up in Liberal MPs' faces and bringing it up, bringing it up. And eventually they broke through. And then we had that amazing announcement from Libby Metham, the leader of the Liberal Party over there, that they're going to reverse gender affirming healthcare. They're going to no more puberty blockers for children if or when they get elected. It's like, that's amazing. And I said this in the final episode of season 1, was unfortunately, like, I just don't see this change coming from the Labor Party. It's not going to happen. Unfortunately, we're dependent on the Liberal Party to really push this into the spotlight. Because the thing is, if they raise it, if they bring it up, then the captured media is like forced to report on it, right? Because at the moment, the media is sort of calling the shots around this issue. But, if the Liberal Party grow a backbone and push it into the limelight, they'll be forced to report on it, and maybe then some of our voices will will break through. That's kind of what I foresee at the moment, unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, that's a novel approach. Um, I think it will be really interesting to see if they can weather the pressure from the corporations who are profiting from this, if they get into government. So I don't know, it might be one of those opposition promises that they never have to act on, you know?
That would be really disappointing. We'll
It would be
see.
very disappointing. I mean, you can kind of see the tricky way the Liberal Party has dumped on Moira Deeming, for instance. So obviously the Victorians are gutless wonders who are just letting Dan, who's not even there anymore, set the agenda completely for this stuff. I mean, it's so transparent.
Yeah. Gosh, Victoria. Ugh, I'm considering moving interstate, to be honest. It's
Welcome here.
thank you. It's really bad here. Yeah, it's like I don't know who to vote for next time. Like they're all just as bad as each other in the state election down here. I don't know. I might be doing a an informal vote, write something on the ballot, and that be done with it. It's really disappointing. The other thing I just thought of was, again, probably not. I don't know how this audience how this will land. But Donald Trump has been running ads over there about how Camilla wanted to give free sex change operations for prisoners. So he's been running ads with that, and it seems to have it seems to be having an impact. I mean, we'll find out. And look, this is not an endorsement of Trump. I'm just saying that he's putting it out there. He's making it an election issue. And it's like I just wonder, if that will have any sort of flow on effect internationally. We'll find out.
Intriguing. Um, so I guess you don't know when series 2 is coming out.
No, I'm not giving any time frame for season 2.
We're just as well. But I have to say I'm hanging for it. I don't know, it might prove more popular with the punters because I think there is so many people with children who are possibly your main demographic for series 1 who just have no clue that this is going on. So many people are so shocked to learn that it's in schools or what their kids are seeing, or most of us don't really closely supervise what our kids watch on TV. We just think the ABC is going to be safe,
Yeah, yeah.
and they're not. So I don't know. But where can women find your podcast?
Sure. It's desexingsociety.com. You'll find all the links there to the streaming platforms. It's also on YouTube if you prefer YouTube. Yeah, and same on Twitter. I'm Desexing Society on Twitter. Yeah. And I'll just let people know, like, some people don't like listening to podcasts. If you prefer to read, I have put all the transcripts up on the website, so that's there too.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great to know. Thank you for that. And just before we finish, Stassja, can I just ask you why you don't have your female penis on tonight? And what's it like to unexpectedly end up in the federal court?
Oh my God, what a trip, eh? I'm spewing. I actually missed both times when it got mentioned on this live stream. I was out of the room. I was driving somewhere, so I missed it. Look, it's a funny thing. It's like the moment it gets brought up, I get this initial like anxiety, like, oh no, they're calling me a Nazi again, and then eventually that passes pretty quickly, and I can have a bit of a laugh about it. So yeah, badge of honor, I would say.
I absolutely think it's a badge of honor, and it was a remarkable speech, I have to say. It's one of my dead favourite moments of political theatre from the women's movement in the last 50 years. So thank you so much for that. Thank you, Stassja. We can all listen to the podcast. I listened to it on the app on my corporation's phone and enjoy, because it's truly marvellous, and we need to bombard all our friends with children with it as well. Thank you, Stassja. It
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
was great. I'm sure women will have questions for you.